Ještě jednou vás vítám na dnešním semináři, který pořádá Pražská škola alternativ společně se studentským sdružením Polis. Jsem moc rád, že vás můžu přivítat tady na půdě Filosofické fakultě Univerzity Karlovy. A naším dnešním tématem je Nová levice ve Slovinsku. A slovenská nová levice je takový velký fenomén. A jsem moc rád, že zde máme dva naše hosty ze Slovenska. To je Bor Kirn a Kira Cerjak. Oba dva přijeli na naše pozvání hovořit o tom, jak vlastně ta nová strana, která vznikla ve Slovinsku, Sjednocená levice, tak jak vznikla, jaký byl ten osud toho tvoření. A já se ani nebudu určitě povídat, to oni řeknou sami mnohem lépe. Já bych vás jenom chtěl přivítat jménem Pražské školy Alternativ, která je organizátorem dnešního večera. A Pražská škola Alternativ je platforma několika sdružení organizací a je tento projekt financován na cíl rozvoje Lucemburkové. Moje jméno je Jan Majček, já jsem organizátor a koordinátor Pražské školy Alternativ a jsem zároveň doktorant na Ústavu politologie Filosofické fakultě Univerzity Karlovy. To dnešní téma, jenom abych ho tak uvedl v českém kontextu, je velmi důležité, protože dneska vidíme i ze zkušeností, které máme z minulých let s pravicovými vládami, že nutně potřebujeme nějakou volební alternativu nalevo. A proto si myslím, že je hodně důležité a proto jsme se taky rozhodli vybrat tohle téma. A je velmi inspirativní vidět, že nová levice, která se snaží nově definovat levicový projekt, a se objevuje i v bývalém východním bloku, byť tedy bývalé Jugoslávie. Nicméně, nebudu to dále natahovat a poprosil bych Bora Kirna, aby začal se svým úvodem.
So my name is Bor Kirn. I am a member of Initiative for Democratic Socialism in Slovenia, which is a part of United Left. So I will talk about the prehistory of the IDS and the United Left, and Kira will talk about the party itself. So, the prehistory of IDS and the United Left dates way back. Even though some of our members, the IDS and United Left, don't even remember, didn't even participate in these movements, at that time, they are one of the main founding pillars of our movement. So most of our active members were already active at that time, and therefore should not be underestimated. This is also important in the terms of ideologic hegemonic struggle in Slovenia. These movements date back to the mid-90s and throughout the zeros. There were two phases of the constitution of IDS and the United Left. So let me start with phase one. Well, it all started with now famous or infamous and very touristic spot in Ljubljana, which is called Metelkova. Metelkova used to be an army barracks for the Yugoslavian People's Army, and it was squatted because it was abandoned after the separation of Yugoslavia. In the early 90s, it was squatted by artists and anarchists. Apart from illegal parties that were held there were strong social and political movements there. The leftist groups finally had a space to organize events, to cooperate and to work. This was one of the main reasons, along with the value of the space, because it's located in the center of Ljubljana. The state and the municipality wanted to tear the place down. I heard that they wanted to build a big shopping mall there. So, but the squatters, along with civil society movements and activists and NGOs and few reporters and some citoyens, let me say, together they managed to prevent the municipality and the government to tear it down. And that was, for me, one of the biggest wins of the civil society for years to come, because from then on, many protests, many meetings, many courses, all of them leftist debates were held there. And this is one of the main reasons, maybe for me, that we still exist in such a way. So, in the late 90s, especially after Seattle 99, the counter-globalization, or rather alter-globalization movement formed. It was also, like many others, formed and managed at Metelko. There is a number of active members of IDS that met and worked together on this topic. And there was actually a big group from Slovenia that came to Prague, I think in 2000, when the protests were held here. So this movement consisted of anarchists, students, activists, NGOs, intellectuals, and etc. So people started working together, get to know each other, you know, and all the time, you know, going on the street, getting experience in the, you know, in the protest movements and in anti-governmental protests. So there is another topic which is very huge, especially for the forming of this leftist coalitions, was the huge group of around 30,000 people that is called Erased People of Slovenia. After the independence, our government erased 30,000 people from the national register. What mean? And these people were mostly from the ex-Yugoslav republics, Slovenian students. And since they had to apply for this Slovenian citizenship, which was very confusing, you know, they didn't get information and stuff like that. So they didn't apply for Slovenian citizenship in time. So they were erased. What does it mean? It means they had no papers, so they couldn't travel, they couldn't get a job, a proper job, they didn't have no social security, they didn't have pensions, they didn't have health care, nothing. They were basically illegals living in Slovenia, but with nothing. So again, a leftist coalition of political groups, started working together and with them, and protested and went to public with it, and organized debates and stuff like that. And one of our biggest successes, although we did not reach our goal, was the anti-NATO campaign. Again, because we had the referendum for the NATO and stuff like that, the EU, of course, at that time, the leftist organizations started, made a coalition, and we started to inform people about NATO. We were at that time one of the very few people that actually were against NATO. And in less than a year, with very media coverage because media was in favor of NATO. And again, with most political parties, for NATO that was again in favor of Slovenia joining the NATO, we still managed to convince a lot of people to vote against. The referendum result was 66 to 34%, which was, without achieving our goal, still a great success for us. So, in this time, the Slovenian leftist movements organized many times through many reasons, like all over the world, anti-Iraq campaign, anti-Iraqi war campaign, anti-fascist rallies, Occupy protests, and many other things. We all, I guess, also in Prague, we all participated in. Anyway, this was. And of course, the Occupy movement in Borsa, the stock market, we call it Borsa, was very, very good because the protesters were camping there for half a year. They were debating, getting to know each other, just getting more and more experience. So, and with all this, also, along with these manifestations on streets, there were quite a few intellectual and theoretical courses, debates, and magazines run mostly by NGOs, activists, and students. Agregat and Tribuna magazines are one of the most important student-led, activist-led magazines in Slovenian activism, let's say. They were wrote by students, they were managed by students, and all of the articles had to be leftist and no other way. And probably the most important organization was Peace Institute's Workers' Punks University, which was 20 years old, and it was also constituted and held at Metelkova, which I started with. They organized courses, debates, and roundtables. Theoretical background had to be leftist, and of course it ranged from Marxism, anarchism, LGBT issues, feminism, Arendtianism, stuff like that. Workers' Punk University is a predecessor of Institute for Labor Studies, which is actually now our think tank of our party. Many ILS or Institute for Labor Studies members are members of our IDS party, the Initiative for Democratic Socialism. This is the Institute for Labor Studies is more of a theoretical part of our organization. It's we kind of with this we educate our members and also the others, if the interested public, let's say. We also have to mention our leftist student party, ISKA. This party can only go to student parliament at our university, but this is kind of, it's not really our young department of our party, but many of their members are sympathizers, help us, and also we help them. Even our member of the parliament actually constituted this party. And we also have to highlight the importance of Radio Student, which is actually the oldest non-stop running independent radio in Europe. Because of the independent status of the radio, they can afford to have different kind of news, different kind of talk shows, everything is more creative, etc. This radio station provides airspace for anarchists, Marxists, for theoretical debates, for LGBT, and much more. I will conclude this phase with the occupation of Faculty of Arts, organized by a group We Are University and the anarchistic group 15O. In the period of 3-month occupation of Faculty of Arts that happened during the winter 2011 and 2012, beginning roughly a year before the mass protests in Slovenia started, although this occupation was not particularly successful in guaranteeing any of the demands we demanded, but it did provide a very valuable collective experience. On this basis, and through the reflection of experience of the occupation, a clear understanding was formed that different and most importantly much stronger organization forms are necessary. So, forms that will be able to go beyond university struggle and ultimately address the universal struggle in our society, which is the class struggle. Because of that, a couple of months after the occupation, a member of Worker Punks University, which is now Institute for Labor Studies, had several months of discussions on how to implement socialist policies and how to build a socialist political subject in Slovenia. These discussions could have lasted for much longer time, but they were interrupted by the protests, by the mass protest movement that happened in the end of the 2012. Because of the movement, we have also decided that it is high time that we announce our plans to the future publicly. Kira will speak about that later. So I will just go, a little bit back now, because I must tell you something about our trade unions, which is also an important issue in Slovenia. Slovenia, due to its massive pressure of our trade unions, conducted a socially gradualist type of transition to capitalism. That means that we did not face wild privatization at the beginning of our separation, like most of the other post-socialist countries did. Probably the main reason for that is that trade unions organized massive protests against the right-wing government at the start of the 90s and deposed it in 1992. A center-left government was forced to give later that came to power after the demos that was deposed in 1992, was forced to give workers some concessions. And in order to assure social peace, and they did so. The first concession was privatization legislation from 1993 that stopped this wild privatization. It enabled that workers and managers that they could take over small and medium enterprises, while the ownership of the large enterprises were still state-owned, and the people got certificates just for the compensation that the state nationalized social enterprises that were back then. So the second concession was that a social economic council was established, which coordinated negotiations between labor, capital, and the state And the third concession was higher social benefits and massive early retirements for the workers and big pensions. So all these changes made Slovenia a transitional exception to some point. Even though we had all this, what I mentioned, we still had relatively or very good economic growth. In 1995, for instance, 7.5%. The economy also prospered in the first years of EU. With its peak in 2007, again with 7% growth. But, however, this economic prosperity was rapid. Underlying this prosperity was rapid indebting of the private sector. So, Slovenia took a financialized credit-led development model similar to the PIGS after the accession to EU. One of the reasons for that was the start of the EU accession process. Export-oriented light industry that was a flagship of Slovenian economy started to lose its competitiveness, mostly due to the accessing of the free trade area in EU. And the other reason was the defeat of the center-left parties that were in power until 2004. So, and the SDS, the very right-wing ex-prime minister, Janez Janša, got into power. So, if we introduce the distinction between these two forces, the first one was more like in favor of the national bourgeoisie, and the other one was the agent of foreign capital. So, and the other one, the Janez Janša SDS, tried to implement the will of the second one, so the foreign capital. And after 2004, they started this neoliberal reforms. Flat tax rate, liberalized capital flows, reducing the taxes for the rich. So, but they were stopped again by the trade unions in 2005 when the general strike, the most massive general strike occurred with 70,000 people on the streets of Ljubljana. So what I wanted to say is that our trade unions are still very strong, relatively strong. They can still prevent our governments from drastic reforms like flat taxes, and now they actually stopped our government they prevent them to introduce these new these new reforms which would hurt the workers' rights and social rights of the people. So, but on the other hand, these trade unions are losing support. They have not yet addressed the precarious workers that most of the people now are, or most of the young people now are. They have not even rhetorically supported the unemployed. The Slovenia uprisings didn't start with trade unions suggesting people to go on the streets. It was these people, precarious workers, the unemployed, the weak, who went on the streets. The uprisings were spontaneous and were coordinated via Facebook, just like the Arabic Spring back then. And it was mostly by unknown individuals that started the movement that's transformed our political sphere by 180 degrees. So this brings me to phase 2. Phase 2 of our prehistory, and of course the most important phase, came with the massive Slovenian people's uprisings at the end of 2012. It was for most people completely unexpected, and it became the most massive movement in 20 years. It all started, it was actually very funny. It started with speed radars in Slovenia's second largest city, the municipality put a lot of speed raiders in the city to get the money, you know, to stop people from speeding. But the thing is that these speed raiders were based on public-private partnership, and the private organization or enterprise that made these speed raiders would get 93% of the revenue from the families. So the people went mad. They started, you know, destroying these raiders from the moment they were built. And only a few days later, after they started operating, the Maribor people started this uprising. It was called the Maribor Uprising, and the first two were actually poorly attended, just like a few hundred people came. But the third one was the surprise of us all. 10,000 people came to Maribor on the 29th of November in the center of the city of around 100,000 inhabitants. So 10% of the people of Maribor. That sparked a fire all over Slovenia. Only a few days later, upheavals occurred in several biggest cities. On December the 2nd, more than 20,000 protesters gathered in Maribor. More than 8,000 in Ljubljana, more than 2,500 in Celje. At that time, agitators, as I said, were unknown. They were via Facebook, the upheavals or the uprisings were organized via Facebook. So, and police, you know, started, you know, even wanted to see who the organizer is, but couldn't. So they couldn't, you know, arrest people even though they wanted to. However, administrators of different groups and pages soon started to coordinate these activities. So by the end of the year, a new coordinated wave of upheavals under a common name, All Slovenian Upheaval or Uprising, started to shake the country. The first All Slovenian upheaval was on December the 21st, 2012, when simultaneous protests were organized in 6 largest cities in Slovenia, including Ljubljana, where 10,000 people gathered. In months that followed, upheavals mostly concentrated to Ljubljana, but also many other cities. In Maribor, they deposed the mayor who built the radars there. The next main goal after the mayor of Maribor was deposed was to depose our right-wing government, led by Prime Minister Janez Janša. The government was imposing harsh austerity and cuts in public sector, and they were establishing bad bank and public coding as means to quick privatization, and they were trying to limit democracy by inscribing fiscal rule in constitution and limiting the usage of public referendum only to matters that do not have fiscal consequences. So besides, they were unpopular also due to their rhetoric. They actually called us protesters zombies and left fascists. And therefore protesters focused their ambitions on the deposal of the government in the beginning of 2013. On January the 8th, the Anti-Corruption Committee we have in Slovenia published its report that the Prime Minister Janez Janša is corrupted and that he had like 200,000 euros that he could not explain where he got. And the upheaval, the uprising started, was again in full force. In Ljubljana it was attended by 12,000 people. In the following morning after that, center and his collaborators started to mobilize their own force. So, consequently, on the February 8th, which is Slovenian cultural holiday, it's actually anniversary of the death of our most famous poet. Two upheavals were organized. In the noon, right-wing supporters of the government gathered in a Congress Square in Ljubljana, which is one of the main squares, and about 4,000 people, mainly with right-wing anti-communist agenda, gathered. The mass was addressed by Janez Janša himself, who appeared in a video conference from Brussels, in which he compared the left-wing upheavals with Nazi Holocaust and called for firm struggle against left fascism. His speech provoked outrage in public. So the same day, in the afternoon, more than 50,000 people came and protested against on the streets of Ljubljana against Janez Janša and his government. And within a month, we deposed Janez Janša. During the constitution of the new government, we had a last large demonstration organized on March 9th that was attended by 9,000 people there, more or less. And on March 20th, the government was finally succeeded by a new one led by a center-left party that's called Positive Slovenia. So, during this protest, a lot of new faces came out, and also new political forces and parties emerged. The most known, of course, is United Left. But the United Left is not a party. It is a coalition of three parties. Our party, Initiative for Democratic Socialism, Sustainable Development Slovenia, and Democratic Party of Workers. And the fourth group, which consists of civil movements, NGOs, and individuals. IDS and the sustainable development of Slovenia were the most noticeable at the protests. Also, Network for Direct Democracy was very active then, but they broke apart. A good part merged with us, the IDS, and a little part went to Solidarnost, which was a new party, a social liberal party that got the most attention because they were not as radical as we were as changing the system. But even though they get good media coverage and very known intellectual and ex-politicians on their side, they could not pass the threshold for the parliamentary elections. And also, pirates were also visible at that time. So, we must understand the escalation of mass anger in the protest in the context of Slovenian transition of the last 20 years, as I was telling you right now. People are angry since all the promises current elites have given were dispelled during the crisis. That is why Slovenia faced the first massive but spontaneous protests. Trade unions, who served as an emergency brake for the last 20 years, had no visible role in protests. Protests erupted spontaneously, people organized via social networks, as I said, and trade unions were only quietly sympathizing with the masses. This illustrates how despair and unsatisfied people in Slovenia nowadays are, since they do not see any alternative to the situation in the current political options. Therefore, the time is right to start talking again about a real alternative, and that is socialism. And this is where I will leave my microphone to Kira.
Okay, first of all, I would like to thank Jan and Prague School of Alternative for inviting us here to the lovely city. I'll try to build up on what Bor was saying. I'll focus mainly in my presentation on the party, by introducing a little bit like the structure, and of course the role and how the coalition formed, as well as I'm going to do an overview of the triple elections we had this year, and of course comment on the outcomes. And I will conclude with some challenges that our party, as well as the coalition, are facing with right now, with the hope to give additional necessary information to have a fruitful discussion at the end. I think Bor did a good job with giving you the context of, like, let's say, the historical momentum of what basically laid the groundwork of, for our party to come to light. It all started first that, it was not that we arose just from the protest movements and then straight to the formalization of the political party. There was like an intermediate phase in between. In the light of the protests, there was you could see a lot of different organizations, movements forming. The advantage of our party was that they came up with a platform. Everyone was being against, but the outcome of our group was that they were able to put together a program of alternative positions. And they were saying, okay, we are for these things, whatever was included in the program. And this then laid the groundwork for any further developments of our party and then later the coalition. In May 2013, the first phase of formalization started when the group of protesters, together with the Network for Direct Democracy, formed the Initiative for Democratic Socialism, but at that time the initiative was only a civil initiative. And then there was a long year of discussions of where to go. Do we want to stay an informal initiative? Do we want to formalize into a party? And this process, was not everyone was for forming a political party. The transition was not clear cut. Not everyone agreed that this was the best or right thing to do. However, in the end, the general opinion prevailed that the formation of a party in the historical context that Bor mentioned, and with the upcoming European elections, was in fact the right decision. So the initiative transformed into a full-fledged party on the 8th of March only this year. And this was actually just a week after the founding congress of the coalition of United Left took place, which was on the 1st of March. However, even though we formally formed the party, we did not want to function or ultimately become just one more regular party that already exists and clearly is not giving people the right answers to their questions. That is why the party is structured in a way that would enable the maximum level of direct democracy, would provide the relationships within the organization to be, rather than hierarchical, more horizontal, and that it would be as inclusive as possible with regards to membership participation and information flow. So if I could just start on the top, the party doesn't have an official leader or president. We only have a coordinator whose function is as a primus inter pares. And then we have a council that has 31 members, which is the coordinator plus 30 people, which is the main decision-making body. So apart from the intrinsic organs, such as the program group, the communication group, and of course the general secretariat, the main focus of our organization is building alliances on all possible levels. That is why we have two special groups that strive for cooperation within Slovenia, as well as on the international, as well we have an international group that seeks to form a broader network of like-minded organizations and parties on the European level. So if I focus on Slovenia, within Slovenia there are like one group that is active on the local level and one that is active on the national level. On the national level, we have a group for cooperation with like-minded organizations and workers. Its main goal is to build and seek to cooperate and bring together other progressive forces, groups, organizations, civil society movements, either from the local or national level, and to get them involved around concrete actions. So this is one part. And then in parallel, we also have the regional group that is in charge of establishing local committees and cells, which are the local committees in the making. Since the party constituted in March, we already established 5 official local committees, with the number of local cells growing every month. With the local elections, we also now have 14 councillors in different municipalities across Slovenia, which is also intensifying our presence and work dynamics in the field. But I'll come to local elections a little bit later. So the primary goal of existing local committees is to help build a true socialist organization, which is at the moment done through seminars for internal education of our membership, as well as with different activities for raising awareness and educating people in local environments. However, we are well being aware that socialism in one country is not possible. That is why we are paying special attention to our regional as well as European networking. For our international group, we actively work on strengthening and tying together progressive left forces from the region, focusing, of course, mainly in countries of former Yugoslavia. We also have good connections with members of European left parties, especially the Linke Syriza from the Austrian Communist Party. For such network building, we not only want to draw attention to what is happening in Slovenia, but we also want to connect with others in our common struggle to learn from them, build on good practices, and seek possibilities of knowledge exchange as well as cooperation on transnational issues. One of such current cooperations is, for instance, the struggle to stop the secret agreements, TTIP, CETA, and TISA. So this is now just a brief overview of the structure to give you an idea how we are functioning. And my next part will focus on the formation of the United Left and the recent developments of the coalition and our party in the light of the election fever we had from May to October. So the coalition of the United Left only formed in April this year, in the wake of European elections. But already mentioned that in the coalition we also have 2 other parties, which is Party for Sustainable Development of Slovenia and the Democratic Party of Labour, the Democratic Workers' Party. So for the European elections, United Left joined the European Left Party, and as such, United Left presented itself during the European elections as the only EU-critical force in Slovenia, openly critiquing the dominance of capital interest and publishing a liberal agenda, which is austerity and structural reforms that are coming from Brussels, I believe, to all of the countries. So with our first election debut as a coalition, we acquired 5.5%, which was unfortunately not enough to get a European parliamentarian. We would need, I think, 2% more. But this result was very satisfying because we exceeded some of the projections we got in the polls, and we came close or even surpassed some of the established parties. And this result also was a clear indicator for us that people are starting to open up to alternatives. So in the national elections, 1 month and a half later, the United Left was, opposed to other contenders, the only one directly opposing privatization of public services and state companies. As an alternative, we offered a set of socialist policies, such as higher taxation rate for capital, lowering the gap between high and low income, highest and lowest wages, reaching full employment with cutting cutting short the working day, stopping privatization process, introducing multiple forms of democracy in politics, such as participatory budget, and the economy. Such as workers' cooperatives and self-management. The United Left is fully aware that such radical changes to the way society is organized cannot be achieved solely at the national level, and that cross-border cooperation with sister political forces will be crucial in the future. However, we believe that now is the time to radicalize the political discourse in order to start making people to make people start thinking in another way. So after hundreds of hours of voluntary work, good organization, and a well-communicated program to the public, the United Left achieved 6% of the vote in the parliamentary elections, which won the party 6 parliamentarians out of 90. The entry into the parliament and the good result of the United Left came as a big surprise to the establishment as well as to the general public. The change in the media discourse and coverage of daily politics was immediately more refreshing and heavier in content. Whereas before the media would only report on who's going to get what share of the coalition pie, our party successfully shifted the media attention towards more tangible topics, such as concerning privatization, etc. This was done by consistent backing up of United Left's position with thorough argumentation and evidence, which contributes to its higher credibility and growing support also in the post-election ratings. The elections, however, were won by another newly formed party called Party of Kira Cerjak, which presented itself in the election campaign as a group of morally clean, non-ideological technocrats. However, in the post-election coalition talks, it became apparent that even though, through the campaign, they were all the time saying they want to have a moderate and thought-through privatization process, this is not going to happen. This is why the United Left decided, completely on principle grounds, to form a socialist opposition of the new government. As for the local elections that followed in October the same year, the end result was, let's say, less glamorous, but still very satisfying. The United Left coalition unfortunately didn't get any mayors, but we got 28 elected councillors for different municipalities, out of which our party got 14. Some people were disappointed with the election result because it seemed that percentage-wise we were losing in the polls. However, one has to realize that local elections have a completely different dynamics than national ones, and that at least in Slovenia there are usually local sheriffs that have been running the municipalities for years. So with this overview of elections, one would think that this trajectory was a conscious and harmonious decision of the coalition partners, and that the result was a success story of a political underdog. But things were more complicated than that, and were mostly stemming from the complex nature of the coalition. As I mentioned before, the coalition is composed out of 3 different parties, each of them having its own specific political platform. The positive side is that ideological differences never really posed a problem, since both of the other parties, with every election, they were willing to adopt the platform of democratic socialism, which was basically, or initially, the platform of our party. However, the structure and the background from all 3 coalition partners are very different, be that age-wise or background from, academic background. For instance, our party that came out of the protest is composed mostly of extremely young people, let's say between 25 and 35, all of them with, that have been academically active throughout the years, whereas the other parties have sometimes led to different standpoints on how the campaign was run, or how the workload was divided. And in addition, the United Left, as Bor already mentioned, also has the fourth pillar, which consists of non-aligned individuals and civil society movements, civil organizations, NGOs. And this, of course, is a unique improvement